Thank you all. That was a great conversation. Julius, thank you for your tough love for all of us democracy advocates. We appreciate that too. I think it's a real set of questions. It can become a conversation that does sound romanticizing, but it's also a real conversation, and it's a legacy conversation in part, in the sense that there is a lot of profound insight in this simple phrase, of the people, by the people, for the people. And I don't think we think about it often or enough. And in some sense, we can really evaluate where we are with regard to each of those prepositional phrases. So government of the people is simply the question of, is there state capacity? Can state institutions get anything done at all? And we know that varies over time. So that actual question of whether you can sort of govern a people is genuinely up for grabs over time. By the people, also obviously up for grabs consistently. And I would say we are at a point of very low degree of having governance by the people. So democratic in name, but when you look at how our political institutions function, and recognize that sort of think about Congress with our gerrymandered, low turnout partisan primaries, it's a very small percentage of the electorate who's actually electing our members of Congress. And yet that is the body whose job is to channel the various conflicting interests of the people. The presidency does not have the job of channeling the interests of the people. It's one of the sort of mistakes of our understanding of that institution. It's Congress that has that job specifically, at least as assigned. So the by the people question is very much in question, and I just think consistently over the course of the conference in the last couple of days, we heard all the places where the by the people aspect of it is causing difficulty for our ability to get economic policy that supports well-being, the sort of real gap between experts and ordinary experience. That gap shows up not just in people's sort of expression of confusion or not sort of sure how to put the pieces together, but I think also in our analytical frameworks. I mean, the very fact that figuring out how the power of place-based work can be synced up with macro economic policy levers, synced up with levers that are about the ordering of the financial markets. Those conversations are all sort of transpiring somewhat separately from each other, even though at the end of the day, what comes out from the work in each of those three buckets, macro, financial, place-based work, is a question of what is housing like for people, what are jobs like for people, what is education like for people. And if the sort of sum of what we care about isn't merely quantifiable productivity, but actually well-being, then we have to be able to measure how those intersecting kind of policy streams do play out in those dimensions. Again, housing, health, education, jobs, experience of family, whether or not we're supporting not just flourishing individuals, but flourishing families, and then flourishing communities. So the point of saying all this is that then it's that the sort of the fact that we're sort of struggling to put the different streams of work together, different conversations together, is a part of the problem in whether or not we have governance by the people, and that of course flows directly to the question of whether or not governance is for the people. At the end of the day, it was only those sort of structures of communicating from the people to our state capacity that can ensure that it will be governance for the people. I appreciated Jed's remarks that democracy's power is in resisting a necessary and continually reappearing tendency of any organizational form towards oligarchic capture. It's not just markets that tends towards oligarchy, any human organizational form, right? The sort of famous iron law of oligarchy that I'm sure you all know. And so in that regard, to understand democracy as precisely that, about resisting that capture, undoing it, seems incredibly important, and also a necessary feature of thinking about our economic policy and economic strategy. I was supposed to be doing sort of reflections in this moment, and I kind of just wandered into it without any sort of great organization or introduction. So what we are going to do now is have a period of collective reflection. We've got, I think, about 20 minutes, a little bit more than 20 minutes for that. And we have a couple of questions for all of you to join in processing what we've heard in the last day and a half. And my hope, I know it's been a rich conversation. My hope is that for each of you, regardless of whether you've come to this from an academic role, from a practitioner role, from economics, from political science, from philosophy, from history, from sociology, that there's been a kind of point of connection, and that you've had sort of rich nourishment for mind and spirit that will help you take the puzzle you're working on to its sort of next level of resolution. So we have first, if we can go to, this is the first question for you all, which I think, do folks use a QR code? Is that the idea? Okay, if you use a QR code and you could just type whatever, we're gonna just watch answers scrolling up here about insights people have gained, so that we can get a sense of, in the room, what are you taking away? So take your time. This is your reflective space. Okay, some recognition of some shared values around care, community, and meaning. The messiness of complex systems. Neoliberal just seems to be what folks don't like. Not enough tough contestation in a safe way. Not sure if that means in the economy or in this conversation. That seems maybe related to the Harvard class that's not willing to go there. Not sure where the there is, so if you want to add to that, whoever put that in, feel free. Polls are too simplistic and for ranking priorities, that's for sure, and again, that's where sort of AI sense making is super valuable. Democratic vigor is a variable we don't understand. The new paradigm for political economy must take account of citizens' whole self and not just their material circumstances. And we talked a lot about objective functions yesterday, and I spent this morning thinking about, okay, if I could expand beyond leisure and consumption, or consumption and leisure, how would I do that? Can we put work in and have that be viable from an analytical point of view? Can we put having a civic role in? I often make the case that we need to transition from having work-life balance to having work-life civic balance. Is that something that we could actually embed in analytical frameworks? Intellectuals are feeling weak. We always feel weak. There's a real opportunity for mass politics grounded in majority of people's lived experiences. Yep. Challenging to build trust, but has been done successfully in other societies like Denmark. Not enough to focus on corporate financial structure and socio-technical infrastructure. Couldn't agree more. I think that has been a theme consistently. I think the hard challenge we're all wrestling with is, in this complex system, what are the entry points? Where do you start? I think the answer has to be many places. It's not just even a both and, but an and, an and, an and, an and. So in that regard, the question really is, how do you form a community of people who are asking linked up questions, working on with linked up conceptions of where we might be heading? Great. An economy of well-being with change on an individual, communal, and systemic level. I think that's another way of putting that. I do think another theme that came out of this conference, so we started, some shared values have definitely emerged: dignity, purpose, work, care, place, whether that's thought of in terms of sovereignty, in terms of communities, in terms of the nation state, and social contract, community and connection. All those concepts are doing a lot of work for people in a lot of different places on the political spectrum and policymaking spectrum. Also importantly, I think as people were offering solution ideas, we were consistently seeing combinations of market civil society and public sector tools, and the idea that these things need to work in relationship to each other. An approach of that kind, where you're trying to put market, civil society, and public sector in relationship to each other, also does place burdens on governance capacity, as we heard. There is sort of governance capacity for the public sector itself, but also for coordinating capacity. Gordon, in his remarks, talked about organizational capital at a local level, sort of place-based level, is important to producing access to good jobs. But that idea of organizational capital probably operates at all levels of the conversation, not just local, but also sort of state and federal. And again, that does put governance at the center of it. So if organizational capital is really key to a different kind of steering of the economy, then governance and connection of governance to the people are also key to a steering of the economy in another direction. Lots and lots of thoughts there. You guys can all still see the comments, right? Okay, good. Yeah, it's not just me, I hope, who's seeing all the comments. Otherwise, you'll just think I'm sort of reading out mumbo jumbo. Let's go ahead. And now we have a question. We had one demography question yesterday that was about religious participation and engagement, faith. We have another demography question for you, which is very targeted. Let's see if it comes up. All right. So I'm sure that lots of those no's are people who have used other systems, but this question was posed by somebody yesterday who is really tracking where tech is. Derek, are you in the room? Let's see if you're here somewhere. There you are. Can you just stand up for a minute and explain to people, what you meant by this question, why you think it matters, and what you observed from this result?
Thanks. Yeah, there was a lot of conversation about the skepticism about AI, and I have two kids who went here for a year and one for 2 years, and they both dropped out, and they're doing AI research. And I think just the capabilities of these models are growing very, very quickly, and they're really useful. And Claude released Opus 4.5 2 weeks ago, and if you haven't used it, you really should, because it's like talking to a grad student. And I'm sure you'll find problems with it, but I think to have these discussions about how AI will impact our society, everyone should be using the cutting edge tools constantly, so there's familiarity with what they can and can't do, and a recognition of how quickly, month after month, things are coming online. Great, thank you, Derek.
A couple other folks, you want to share that? You want to share that thought? I think was that Tim? Do you want to share your response there? Tell us why you're responding that way.
Being an observer and participant of a lot of technology revolutions, there's a long period of discussion, almost inevitably, where there are very strong voices from people who have never used the new technology, who tell us why it's bad. This was true with, again, debate after debate, from the early World Wide Web to, things like, Google Books. Just again and again, the strongest opponents had never actually tried the system they were criticizing.
All right, thank you. We do have some mics in the room, so we have one more question for you, and I'm going to try to go back to some of the answers from the previous one as well. I don't know if there's a way I can see the other answers. Anyway, I'll figure that out. We have one more question for you, and I am going to invite the sort of folks with mics to also pull some of the comments that we're getting here into the room, give you guys a chance to vocalize your comments. So what is a burning question that you will be leaving with? Okay. All right. Let's see if I can. These are moving so fast. All right, so for the person who's asking the question, what is the relationship between state capacity and democratic participation? Are you up for sharing your question and how that emerged for you and what you're hoping for an answer? Great, thank you. There's a mic somewhere.
Oh, sorry, who was it? Oh, I got it.
Up here in the front.
Hi, Alessandra. I work in the library at HKS. This question is coming from kind of a discourse around abundance, I think, where I think there's some skepticism around the benefit of public discourse and democratic participation, where it can be seen as kind of holding up progress, right? What happens when you have neighbors who are like fighting against affordable housing, for example, because they show up to the kind of anemic public processes that we've set up. And so I think that's getting kind of incorrectly, in my opinion, pitted against state capacity. But from what I'm hearing from all of you, that's really the opposite of what needs to happen. And we need to really invest in more robust processes for genuine public participation that's more equitable instead of prioritizing voices that we typically hear from all the time. So I guess I'm curious about what that relationship looks like and whether I'm kind of cohering what everybody is saying correctly.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's great. Absolutely. And I think this is one of the most important questions right now about the future of our democracy and our capacity to build an approach to political economy that supports well-being. I was sort of using the terms of energy up here, for example, and I think that the challenge is how do you build and operate representative institutions simultaneously for energy, for inclusion, for Republican safety in the language of the 18th century, which means protection of basic liberties, that protection from arbitrary domination, coercion, and whiplash, and so forth. And so, one of the themes of this conference, I think, is that we have a lot of optimization problems, multi-objective problems. And I guess if there's a thing maybe that would be beneficial to come out of this would be, when and where in the work we all do on policy, how can we help people think about multiple objectives simultaneously? And start first by asking the question of how do you align across multiple objectives before you come to considering trade-offs. And even just that sort of analytical shift would actually change how policy making unfolds. But one of the key alignment problems is exactly the one that you just named. So I appreciate that question. Thank you. Somebody else wrote that everybody seems to be yearning for solutions to the connection crisis, but there are a few mentions of how to get there. Can whoever shared that, are you willing to share out loud and say more? Yes, okay, in the back. Thanks.
Yeah, so I just heard a lot of discussions on various policies to respond to some of the economic challenges that have popped up, but the crisis like loneliness, polarization, some of these things, I think we're kind of still reaching for more and better solutions to those problems. And we have a tougher time figuring out what those are because they're more emotional than economic.
Do you have any first sort of starter thoughts about what solutions might be?
Well, yeah. I did national service. I did AmeriCorps and CCC. Thank you. And I really think if national service was built at a bigger scale, it's something that could really help people. I was just relating the story of one of my core members who basically said national service was the first time he ever had friends around him, and it was the first time he had a community, and that was really meaningful for him. And we don't really tell those stories. We often think about national service as a bunch of do-gooder projects, but not something that is kind of foundational social infrastructure. So that's just one idea, but I think there are probably others out there.
I appreciate that. I heard somebody observe earlier this week that national service itself could be a part of the response to the impacts of AI on the labor market as well. That if you are facing a crisis of early entry jobs for young people, maybe that's an opportunity for national service. And particularly for engagement in all those kinds of work that do require embodiment with other people, with real people. So thank you for those thoughts. Let's see. Does anybody want to nominate a question that you can see on the screen that we're discussing? Sorry? The bottom one. When we can't even come to consensus, is it that one? Let's see. Okay, when we can't even come to a consensus about the democratic erosion by cloud AI and related political power in this room, how are we going to build political movements against neoliberalism and corporate powers outside of the room? So that's a broad question, I think, just about pluralism and disagreement and how we benefit from that. There have been a lot of questions, too, about consensus and sort of seeking consensus. And I will say, just speaking for myself, I wanted to be very clear. My goal in this conference was not to generate a consensus. Okay? Just for the record, I want you all to know that that was not my intention. Okay, thank you, Matt. So my intention was to surface the conversation that we're having across different parts of our political landscape. There may be some things we agree on, and that's super interesting to explore as important areas of work that we should pursue. So, for example, I was really struck by the way in which the theme of family does come in and out across different parts of the political spectrum, and what does it mean to reconceive, substantial domains of policy? If you ask the question, how is this qua family policy? How is technology qua family policy? How is migration policy qua family policy? I think it does give you a sort of interesting way of changing the conversation. And in that regard, I think right now we are really in a learning phase with each other. I think that's the sort of excitement, in all honesty, of the end of neoliberalism. And so, in terms of a definition, we did hear some definitions yesterday, but very specifically, approaches to trade liberalization, globalization, reliance on markets as the solvers of problems. That sort of core package, others could detail it more completely than I, but that has yielded a suite of emblematic policies over time with regard to how WTO has talked about development for developing countries, with regard to things like use of vouchers in various areas of social policy, charter schools, for example. All those are examples of a sort of policy paradigm for trying to maximize personal freedom, maximize economic growth, increase general levels of income sort of broadly across the globe. Others, as I said, would provide a better and fuller picture of it, but just for those of you who felt that there was no clear definition, let me at least put that on the table. And it really is over because politics has gotten rid of it, not because academics have gotten rid of it. Let me just be very clear about that as well. Politics has gotten rid of it. And so we are really living in a period of chaos, as the last panel emphasized. But that also means it's an opportunity for steering and for trying to figure out where exactly do we want to go. So that was really the purpose here, not to expect that we would achieve consensus, but just to figure out what are the things that we do actually agree on, and where can that help us have some new and fresh conversations. And again, as I said at the very, very beginning, the one principle that I did hope might be a shared principle was that we should think about political economy as being for our shared safety and happiness. That sense of a collective purpose should be for the general welfare. Language of the Declaration of Independence, language of the Constitution. And this is not a trivial comment. Okay, I want to make very clear about that. Sometimes you can hear people cite founding documents and the like, and it can sound simply like the repetition of words we've heard so many times, so many different contexts, they become meaningless. It is not a trivial comment to say that government should be for the people. I personally do not consider our current government to be broadly for the people. We are watching crony capitalism at work, as Danny said on the first day. crony capitalism is the opposite of government for the people. So right now, in this period of chaos, the end of neoliberalism was a different way of structuring who was benefiting and so forth. But right now, what we are seeing emerge into sharp and potentially durable existence is a very powerful form of crony capitalism that erodes well-being, it erodes democratic freedoms, it erodes stability for business planning, et cetera. So in that regard, when I say to you, the one principle is for the people, I am inviting everybody into a conversation that is working against the powers and problems of crony capitalism. And with that, okay, we have lunch, and it will be time for all of you to do more thinking together. I hope you will all agree that we did, in fact, think in public in this conference. Yeah? Good. Okay. That was definitely the goal. And now we have small groups over lunch, and so I'm going to bring up on screen the different topics. And so don't get up yet. I have a few more things to say. The different topics for lunch table conversations. All right, so you may have signed up in advance, and that's great if you did. And if you didn't sign up in advance, that's okay too. You can still go to any of these topics, okay? And what's going to happen is lunch, I believe, has been set up now outside. And in a minute, when I invite you to, just hold on, then you're going to go get your lunch. And we do ask you to clear this room because this room is going to be reorganized so that then you can come to the table topic that you've selected. And so now that you've had a chance to look at the topics and pick one, everybody got your topic picked? Now we're going to show a slide that's going to show you where to go for those topics. Okay. The tables will have markers on them, so if you don't remember this, if you're like me and there's no way you're going to remember this after you see the dessert, you're like, oh, I want that, oh, everything else is gone from my head, then the tables will have markers on them, okay? We'll keep the slide up. The last thing I want to say one more time is just such a huge round of thanks to the Ash Center team, to Darshan Gu, to Sarah Hubbard, Sadie Cox, and to the events team. Also to all the building personnel who worked here to get the event operating for us. So with that, thank you. Enjoy lunch and more thinking together in public.